All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of CMO Weekly. Before we get started, got to give a big shout out to Open Fortune. Open Fortune didn't just make the fortune cookie not cute anymore. They made it into a real marketing asset by distributing fortune cookies in 47,000 restaurants, putting ads on the back, keeping your fortune the same, and just a nice surprise and delight for your customers. So shout out to Open Fortune for making today possible. All right, folks. Buckle up, because today we're diving into the mind of a marketing maestro who knows how to make brands not just famous, but iconic. I'm talking about none other than Sandeep Seth, the Chief Growth Officer for Tapestry Inc. and the CMO of Coach Brand. If there's anyone who could take a brand from good to legendary, it's Sandeep. He's the guy who's been steering Coach's global brand strategy, and now he's enabling Tapestry's long-term growth like it's just another day at the office. But before he was slinging luxury high-end bags and setting trends in New York, Sandeep was the big boss at SK2, P&G's multi-billion-dollar prestige beauty business. He didn't just lead, he disrupted, transforming SK2 into the powerhouse across 10-plus countries and racking up Cannes Lions awards like they were participation trophies. But let's not forget, this isn't a guy who just knows how to market. Sandeep knows how to lead with vision, rallying teams across continents and industries. He's not afraid to shake things up, whether it's pioneering digital ecosystems or delivering big, disruptive ideas that leave a lasting mark. So, without further ado, let's get into it, Sandeep. Welcome to the show. And I'm curious, man, like how did this all unfold? How did your career unfold? What was step one for you?
Firstly, thank you very much, David, and really appreciate those kind words. You make me look much better than I am. Thank you.
I try to. That's my job, but I really appreciate you jumping on and like just going through doing the research on your background. I was just so impressed, right? And it's I felt like I knew you before just by reading all about you. What was step one in like your marketing journey, or just like career journey at all?
Interesting you ask. I very often talk about my career as misfit for use. I've always landed up in places I have no idea about. If I just track back my career, I'm a civil engineer.
Okay.
I started with learning how to build bridges. Probably didn't build many. From there, I went into selling fax machines door to door, getting doors slammed on me.
There you go.
Cold calling there. From there, I was doing systems integration in steel plants. Never thought about marketing.
So talk about those. I know you probably, when you're on stage, don't talk about those jobs too much, but I'd love to dive in. Like, what did building bridges, knocking on doors, selling fax machines, what did you bring in from those experiences into today's marketing world?
I think those are very foundational for me. Look, I may sound like a geek. My favorite subject is still physics, right? And I start everything with how things work and what makes it work. And I've been reading a lot about how leadership is all about quantum physics nowadays. And we can talk about that for hours.
Yeah,
at another time.
Give me like the spark notes there.
Look, if you look at it, 20th century was a lot about linearity, right? It was about Newtonian physics of every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It was about efficiency. It was about breaking tasks into smaller pieces. 21st century is about quantum mechanics or quantum physics. It's about multiple right options at the same time and how do you pick, right? And if you have to thrive as a leader in today's world, you really have to be able to deal with that chaos and that ambiguity on that. And that shift is so very, very important and something that I personally really enjoy being a student of it and learning a lot on that. So I think, what I learned as an engineer, it's built my curiosity, which is what drives me in the unknown. My sales job was absolute fun. When I first started...
It was fun getting the door slammed?
I had no idea what I signed up for when you cold call, you go and knock, and you get the door slammed.
Yep.
And when 10 of those happen in a day, it's not a pretty day.
It definitely teaches you a lot. I never sold fax machines, but my first job was selling below single A baseball tickets. I called 50 people a day, and I didn't get one sale. I got one sale actually with my parents. But I got told no so many times that it really, really was foundational, right? Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your leadership style, right? When you got into that first leadership role, there's a lot that comes with a lot of things that need to get done and employing the right people to do so. So how would you describe your leadership role, based on, all your experiences and good bosses and bad bosses?
Yeah. Look, I've learned a lot from some amazing bosses I've had over my career, and they are still my mentors and close friends, many of them over the past 3 decades that I've worked with. A lot for me as a leader is to remember that you're not a supervisor, you're a partner, you're co-creating, right?
Sure.
Because ideas can come from anywhere, right? That openness to listen. So one thing I don't do, and I've actually learned this from my bosses and I stick to it, is I don't sit in meetings reviewing what my direct reports or what my team are doing. I know what they have to do and they will do it. At the end, the results will show how well they perform. My job there is to really be a coach, really sit there and have discussions on what's on their mind, what are the challenges, how do we tackle things together, and that's where ideas come. I mean, very often, instead of sitting in a room, I like to just walk with the people who are there. Like, let's go down, walk down the High Line and have a chat. Let's talk about what's bothering you and how can we do things differently.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely, and I really like that unorthodox approach. You absolutely need. What I'm hearing from you is like trust your employees, trust your creatives, right? How does trust come across with like creativity, right, and everything that you're doing? Because it's not just data analytics, right? There is a part of that in marketing, but a lot of this is subjective as well.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, every brand, every company has different ways to articulate that. Tapestry, we say it's a mix of magic and logic that comes together. But at the end, even creativity stems out of something, and we believe that. Personally, I have always kind of believed in. Creativity comes from understanding your consumer, understanding their life, and asking the question how well you fit on that. So, well, yes, at some level it sounds subjective, but if you break it down, there is a lot of knowledge that you need to build around that. So we've been spending hours talking to our consumers, right? I mean, we do ethnographic research where I'm spending 2 to 3 hours in the homes of these consumers with my team, where we talk about everything. We talk about their life, we talk about their stresses, we talk about their shopping behavior. We go shopping together, and that's where insights come from. And those insights, when creatively transformed into an execution, is where the magic happens.
Do you I'm hearing that like listening is super important, right? Do you have a time where you were listening, whether it be at P&G, any of your jobs, right, where you listened to your consumer and it was something that you did not expect at all, but that ended up being a big win?
I would say all the time, right? I mean, I can talk an example more recently at Coach. I came in again as a misfit into fashion industry, never worked in fashion, don't know anything about handbags, except that Coach is an iconic brand and Coach can change the world. So what can we do? But the first question, every time I met anyone, I would say I'm Coach, and everyone will tell me about their first Coach bag. I mean, that's a consistent theme. In fact, my wife reminded me when I was interviewing that the first bag I bought her was a Coach bag. Now, so everyone has a first Coach bag story. So, I was at this one of our Coach stores I was in Philadelphia. We were doing store visits. And the store manager comes to me and says, hey, we have a customer. She's been buying from us for a long time. She wants to say hi to you. I'm like, how does she know me? Said, no, she was asking, who are you? I said, you are a CMO, and she wants to meet. So I'm like, sure. And this person's been buying Coach for over 40 years, right? And I started talking to her, and she said, thank you, you guys are doing an amazing job. I'm like, well, I would love to know, like, when did you first buy Coach? She said, oh, I was in college when I bought my first Coach bag. I said, that sounds interesting. Tell me more about it. He said, that bag has so many stories that my husband doesn't know about also.
That's so good.
It was so amazing to hear that, it was not just a physical purchase. It was something emotional to her. And actually that gave birth to our campaign in my tabby, really started from as we heard this whole insight of what people carry in their bags is not just things, but they carry their emotions, they carry their feelings on that. So these kind of insights, emotional insights, are so critical. Now, I know this is kind of on the emotional side, but very often you hear very functional things, right? I mean, coming from P&G, I've done consumer work across many categories, and a completely different categories, Pampers. Right? And when I've done research, going and being in the home of a new mother with a child, it's not about how well that diaper soaks. It's about if my baby sleeps, my baby's mental development is going to be very different. You get insights that are so powerful.
And intimate too.
And intimate too.
Yeah, and I'm sure, right, when you were speaking to that woman who had bought a Coach bag 40 years, just like knowing that you care, right, even though it's like a one-to-one interaction, and that's something that, you can't scale, you can't have one-on-one calls with every single consumer, but just doing that is like going around the extra effort. I want to talk about P&G. You touched on it, right? I've had plenty of guests on the show that talk about P&G, and I only, I've never worked at P&G, but I hear about it in like the best light, right? There's a reason you stayed there. 23 years I'm looking at, right? And I'm curious, right? What about P&G, was so special about that education that made you want to stay there so long?
Look, P&G is a marketing university. I did my MBA and landed up at P&G. I wasn't even thinking marketing at that stage, right? I was like, when I went in for my MBA after a few years of working all kinds of jobs, I was kind of debating, should I go into finance, should I go into investment banking? And I landed at P&G really not knowing anything about marketing. And my first year at P&G, I just felt so inadequate. Like, everyone seemed like a marketing professor out there. But that's what drove my curiosity. The things that you learn about the importance of listening to the consumer and how consumers help define the strategies, whether it's product strategy, whether it's a communication strategy, whether it's a go-to-market strategies, like on distribution point of view. So I think it's a constant learning experience. And I would say through my career, from learning the fundamentals of marketing, which I think P&G taught me much better than a B school would, to really going through the transformation. I started in the era of Mad Men and traditional advertising and television, to learning the difference between SEO and SEM. I had no idea what those terms meant back in 2010, to really moving into a whole digital transformation. So again, a lot of emphasis at P&G is about training and coaching. That whole culture of you are a coach, not a manager, has been inculcated in that environment.
Yeah, I mean, I just hear that over and over, right, about like a marketing university, even from people who have MBAs, right, like yourself. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, your background, and just, you bring a very multicultural viewpoint, living in all these different places, right? You're not originally from the States, right? It's a completely different market than India, than Singapore, right? How does that help you as a marketer, with all your background, just being so globally involved?
I think that's an amazing question, and to me, it's not even just as a marketer, but as a person.
As a person, yeah.
It's completely evolved me, over the years. Coming from India, which is quite multicultural across the region, but still homogeneous in a way, right? Moving to Singapore was a huge cultural shift. But when I was in Singapore, I was spending a lot of time in Japan, in Korea, in China, in Vietnam, just understanding those cultural differences. Sometimes they are so polar opposite.
Can you give me an example?
So, Japan, right? You sit in a meeting and you present something. No one's going to respond. No one's going to say anything. No one's going to disturb you. No one's going to ask you a question. The meeting ends in an hour. No one will say anything and walk out of the meeting. And now you have no idea whether they'll listen. You have no idea whether this is going to get done. And you realize that the value of silence there is so different. And you have to understand the body language to understand whether they have bought into this or not. It was a shock for me. My first few months trying to work in that environment was even navigating, did anyone pay attention to a word of what I just said?
Yeah,
to building lifelong relationships and such strong bonds with them. What that also has allowed me to do in my personal life is don't start with preconceived notions and judgments about a different culture.
Yeah, that's so important.
Right, on that, because and that helps in marketing or anything we do, because our consumers are coming from these different cultures, right? And the context in which they grow up in China or in Japan or in India or in the US, it just shapes everything around them. So leaving the biases out, which is not easy. As a human being, we all are biased in some way or the other, whatever we say, right? But trying to leave that out for a moment, trying not to put your whole value system on someone, and just trying to understand why is it this way in a culture is so important as human beings, but as a marketer, it's equally precious on bringing them. A lot of brands make cultural mistakes as they enter different global markets on the...
Absolutely, and that's so important. I'm really happy that you touched on it as being a person as well, and not just... We talk a lot about the marketer and their career and stuff, but that's so important to understand different perspectives and such. And you were talking about that, and it made me think about... I was speaking to another guest earlier today, and we were talking about how we like to put people in boxes, right? It makes us very comfortable, right? If I'm going to, it gives the illusion of control. I know what's going to come out of your mouth, or I have an idea, right? But when somebody's not in that box, right, or that consumer, it's uncomfortable for you, right? Which is something that humans do, which is not necessarily great. What's a time where, either a boss or somebody in your career put you in some sort of box and, you showed them, that wasn't that box and you moved in and you had a good lesson for everybody involved?
Look, I kind of started by talking about misfit for you, on that. And there's always a box, right? I mean, an engineer coming from in India, being a man,
sure.
You get boxed, on what you can do. I mean, that's a starting point. I mean, I get asked a lot of times, do I work in IT? I mean, that's a question that comes to me every time. And through my career, as I moved into marketing, that was not my forte.
Sure.
Right on that, trying to break that. When I moved to beauty, and I spent 20 years out of my 23 at P&G working in beauty, honestly, I most of the time I was the only man in that group, very often. And honestly, in some ways, it helped me because I realized I know nothing about this. I don't understand both the physical aspects of what beauty stands for and the emotional side of it, right? So it helped me open up very differently to say, hey, I don't know, I need to learn through this entire experience. So, so that box is always there for all of us, doesn't matter where we come from. But the question is how you deal with that. And my approach to that is be open to learning things and start humbly by saying, I don't know. I mean...
yeah, and I love that as well, right? Because you being one of the only men in the room in a beauty, right? I think it brings a completely different perspective of thinking about things differently than not necessarily like a room full of women. And this happens in all different kinds of industries. I'd love to hear about, your move to New York, right? You've been in New York for about three plus years, right? How did that opportunity come up with Tapestry? And, what was your first impression of this opportunity and brand?
So, I, 23 years at P&G, I was quite sure I'm going to retire there.
Yeah.
That's how it was kind of going. Till I got a call from a recruiter in Dallas, and I was like, wow, Dallas? I didn't even know where that was. Kind of, but
totally
get the point. And it was like, I was asked the question, do you know about a brand called Coach? I'm like, I would be living under a rock if I were to go to Coach, right? Everyone said Coach, but why me? And I think that was a fascinating conversation. I was so inspired when I met Joanne, who is the Tapestry CEO there. She had just become the Tapestry CEO, and I heard a vision of what she is looking for, and how she is so passionate about building brands, and she kind of shared with me on how what I bring from that brand building background could bring the disruption here. So I took up the challenge. Look, I knew very little about fashion industry. It was putting me in a very, unknown...
Beauty and fashion are tied close enough.
Tied close, but still different. It's very different, right? I mean, if you look at beauty, it's still much more scientific, product, lab-driven versus creative, director, design-driven kind of an industry, right? Moving from Asia to US, was new for me, for my family. So in every possible way, it was throwing me into another chaos. But that's what I love, right? Yeah. And I took that challenge up, saying that, hey, it's going to be fun. Look, New York was not unfamiliar to me. I used to travel here all the time. So if I had to pick one city to move to from Singapore, New York would have been at the top of the list. But yeah, I took up the challenge and I am having fun.
And when they brought you in, what were the biggest pain points that the brand was looking to solve? From an outside looking in, Coach has such a strong brand, right? It's something like you said that people have had these bags for 30 plus years. They have an idea of Coach in their head, and you talked about that brand positioning. But what was step number one? What were you trying to solve for them?
I think step number one for me was to even understand and articulate what's the problem. Because you said, so Coach is an iconic brand, right? Yeah. So awareness is not an issue. Ask anyone, everyone knows Coach, right, on that.
Sure.
Everyone's had some experience of either buying a Coach bag or getting a gift from a Coach, getting a gift, or, their parents kind of giving them, getting their mother or your sister. So everyone's experienced the brand, right? But then the challenge is the brand is still not growing and resonating with the future generations. A lot of people would see it as my mother's brand or my grandmother's brand and that, right? So that was our biggest challenge, and articulating that that's what we are addressing. It's not about awareness,
sure,
right? It's not about, knowing how good the quality of the bag is, because everyone knows Coach has outstanding quality. It has 80 years of heritage that is pretty much, at least I would say in the US, everyone knows about that, right? So it's now about changing that image and trying to make it relevant to the future generation. So that was the challenge or opportunity that we kind of laid out, and we said, okay, how do we go about doing it?
And how have you done that?
How have I done that? Many ways. Look, and this is my third brand where I'm going through the same challenge. When I started on Olay at P&G, it was my grandmother's brand to the extent it smells like my grandmother. When I started on SK2, it was my grandmother's brand, and now this is the third time around in a different market with a different consumer. That I think it's really about understanding those subconscious impressions of the brand, trying to understand what is etched in their mind that is driving that impression, and then trying to change that in the subconscious. So this is in some way a lot of psychology. I mean, if you kind of look at that, trying to understand what are those things that they remember when they think of Coach, and what are those associations. So we did a lot of work trying to figure out associations of the brand in their mind, and think, how do I change that to associations that become relevant for them, right? I mean, a lot of their association was, I've seen my mother or grandmother carry, or when I go to a grocery shop, the people I see carrying, sometimes the associations are linked with too much of logo and branding is driving that for me. I mean, I don't want to be seen with that. There's a lot of luxuries changing on that. Also, who they see in Coach advertising and what kind of image they're getting out of that. So I think we had to kind of look at multiple things across the entire brand. This is not just about a communication. This is about a product strategy. This is about a merchandising strategy. This is about a communication strategy. This is about who represents the brand on that. So I think that was the gamut of things we looked at. And one by one, we have tackled each and every one of them. I mean, introducing Lil Nas X back in 2021 was unexpected. Right? No one thought that,
most grandmas don't know about
that. You know what? That's exactly the first consumer reaction we got. When we were looking at comments where people say, Coach and Lil Nas X, it's my mother or grandmother's brand. They don't follow him. Like, why Lil Nas X, right? So it starts with that questioning. It starts with that
again, right?
And then you build from there.
Yeah, and it's not putting Coach, when Coach is in a box and they're doing something else different, right? It makes people a little uncomfortable, but that's growth, and that's where that happens. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Peace.
I wanted to talk about, right? I'll be honest with you, right? You probably could tell by my fashion, I'm not the most, dressed up. I think, thank you. I paid him to say that, but let's, one thing for me, right? I think of it as seasons, right? Like, it's like, okay, it's summer, it's 100 degrees out, I need to wear this, right? However, retail, and not just Coach, but all retail brands, right? They're on like a week-to-week schedule, which is something that I found fascinating, right? You go into H&M or Coach, and 2 weeks later, there's a new set of things always, right? So how do you adjust marketing so quickly behind the seasons and what's in style, out of style, etc.?
I think we need to look at marketing's broader role. It's not just about selling product, it's about creating brand impression. So very often we relegate marketing down to product advertising, right? And I feel that's where we lose the bigger plot of marketing's role, is creating those positive associations with the brand and let the consumer look for the product on that. So that's a big shift we've done. We used to be at a place where we were advertising every product we launch, and to your point, moving from one message to the other every 10 days, literally, right on that. Now, remember, as a consumer, you have hundreds of brands from a category and hundreds of category bombarding at you. A brand is lucky if the consumer remembers one thing from you. And if you're trying to send them a different message every day, you're not going to register anything on that. So we had to get out of that temptation of marketing every product, that temptation of talking about every season, but go back to the core message and the reason why we exist on that. So we moved into the why, which is rooted in that whole insight of self-expression. So we took that and said, we're going to talk only one thing, and we're going to keep talking that thing. It's about self-expression, and our Coach will be that platform for consumers to, show their own self-expression, right? So the brand becomes a platform. So our entire campaign of Courage to be Real is really based on that singularity of message, and rally it around one core iconic product, which is our Tabby bag, and we built. So Now it's been 5 rounds of that campaign, right, over 2 years, and we've stuck to that singularity. Now, today's marketing is quite multi-layered in that sense, right? I mean, there is, the whole demand generation where you create the appeal,
sure,
but also consumers go search for it. I mean, in the old world, it was window shopping, and today it's with social media flipping, right, on that.
Absolutely.
They're going to look for it, right? So your products need to be present when they're looking for it, right? But what you're marketing is the brand and not the product. And that singular message is the most important thing.
I loved what you said there because you really simplified it, right? I think you're self-aware in the way where, I think some CMOs, and we could get into our heads on, hey, everything that we say, people really care about, right? We could just keep on hitting, they're going to care, they love us, etc. But if you just simplify it, right, what you did, there's a reason why that campaign is going 5 times because you're just trying to hit that one core value. I want to talk about your current role as well, right? You were the CMO of Coach for 3 years, right? And the last 3 months, you're the Chief Growth Officer at Tapestry. You must have done something right because now they gave you the whole enchilada of all of Tapestry. It always blows my mind when somebody is running not only one brand and being the CMO and Chief Growth Officer, but multiple, right? What challenges does that come with for you? And why were you the right fit for that role?
Now, at the core of growing anything is really laying out a very clear and simple growth strategy. We talked about communication strategy and singularity, but I think the bigger question is how do you grow a brand and what's our strategy? Sometimes what happens is there's a temptation of let's do 100 things, right? Let's throw every dart and we're going to hope some of them are going to stick. But getting very clear where the growth is coming from. So we started by very clearly laying out our growth strategy is to grow through acquisition. We're going to acquire the next generation and through that create the aspiration for the brand on that, right? And so everything started not with marketing or one aspect of the brand, but it started with us laying out what that growth strategy is.
Sure.
We shared that with the investors back in September of 2022 when we did our investor day, where we kind of called out what is going to be Coach's growth strategy. There was a lot of skepticism around that externally also saying, but if you go after new customers, what's going to happen to your existing customers? Are you going to lose more than you're going to gain? There's always that. But again, the simple fact is, if we are able to bring new customers, they are the most skeptical because they've not bought into. Existing customers like you already. If we can do marketing that is so amazing, and if we can make product that is so amazing that can even bring the skeptics in, we will be able to retain our current customers on that, right? And this principle holds true across brands, across categories on that. So building on that, we created the whole growth strategy, which is, of course, much more multi-layered than what I'm kind of sharing with you. Now, the challenge is how do we take that and replicate at scale on other brands? And that's part of my job, which is building the right teams across Tapestry and across the brands, identifying the right strategies that can help each of these brands find their own cohort and grow within that. And go ahead. So that's an exciting challenge, and I'm looking forward to doing some fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking about just bringing a team together, right, it's so crucial for success. What are some lessons? You seem like a lifelong learner, right? You've been in marketing for 20, 30 years at this point, right? What's something that one of your, junior employees or someone under you has taught you, whether in life, marketing, or anything? And listening?
I think this is, I also have two kids, and I'm learning from them. They are Gen Zs. One of them is 19. He's just back in Singapore. He's joined the army. He's doing his national service there. My daughter is 14. And one thing I've learned from them is you can never be right. You have to listen to them, and you have to listen to a different perspective. And that holds true for me at work too. And why is that so? Because every generation is living in a very, very different context. Very often when I'm trying to, when my kids will come back and say something, my initial tendency is, no, that's not how it's to be done. Then I remember this is exactly what I used to hear from my parents, that you should not do this, right? And I would kind of reflect back on how I felt then when I heard that, right? Because they were not appreciating the context in which I'm growing, right? And I think in an organization, that's so true. Very often the C-suite has a lot of experience, but with that experience comes the resistance to change. right? There's a way things were done and we need to do that. Overcoming that and allowing each and every employee express. That doesn't mean you do everything everyone says, but reflecting on it, listening to that can really change the game on that. And a lot of my focus within my team is allow that expression internally of everyone, and the ideas will naturally flow out of that. Some bad ideas, and that's okay to try bad ideas too.
Yeah.
We're going to learn out of that what worked, and I think it's a growing process. So I'm very comfortable with the team doing mistakes versus telling them don't do it. It's going to be a mistake on that.
Absolutely.
On that. Let's learn fast. Let's go ahead and try different things on that. So I'm very open to that. Of course, at the end, the buck stops at me.
Yeah.
If it doesn't deliver, I have to take the accountability on it because I am allowing the team to do that. So, it's not easy. It wasn't comfortable when I started doing this 20 years back. But over a period of time, it's taught me that at the end, it gives you more value despite the number of failures you may have in the process, because the gains you're going to get on that are going to be really exponential. So a lot of that is how I'm approaching.
Yeah, and I want to talk about, your personal life a little bit too, where it sounds like you have a very loving family. You have, an amazing career. What advice would you give to somebody who, wants that, right? Like wants to be the amazing father, right, or mother, but also wants to, show up in their career and teach and lead. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to avoid cliches here, right?
Sure.
Because that's easy to get into that. I thoroughly love what I do. I'm going to start with that. I wake up every morning. I want to go to work even after 30 years of doing this. Because very early, I've had, different career changes and I've setbacks. Some I liked, some I didn't like on that. One of the things I realized is dragging yourself through something you don't like is not good for you or people around you or your family. So you got to get into what you love or start loving what you're in. Either way, doesn't matter, right? I mean, each of us are in a very different place on that. Once you do that, the balance comes on its own, right? I mean, I personally have never had that struggle of where the balance is, right? I mean, if I need to be in my kid's school for something or if I need to be with my wife for something, I'll drop the most important thing and go for that, right? But then if I need to put in those 18 hours at work someday, my family would understand that this is needed. So how do you build that? And each one of us are very different in what work-life balance looks like, right? And I don't know, I mean, sometimes balance is a very tricky word on that, right? So the fact that I enjoy what I'm doing here, as I kind of mentioned, my son is in Singapore now, my daughter and wife are in New York. I'm traveling to Asia literally every other month, right, on that. And
it's not a short flight.
Right, and it's fun, right? So if you're enjoying what you're doing, it's no longer a challenge to balance across every minute. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, then ask yourself a question: is this the place you want to be then on that, right? It's a hard question, right? We all have to kind of go through that, and you will find your balance. I don't think I've regretted any moment where I missed something that was important in, with my family.
Priorities
on that.
Yeah.
Even though I have my responsibility at work, and sometimes, I bring my kids along into work, right? I mean, recently my wife was in Singapore because my son was there and my daughter was alone. We had the runway fashion show. My daughter had the pleasure of sitting in the front row with me at the New York Fashion Week, right? So,
that is so special. I know that we wanted to avoid cliches, and I think this is a good place to start wrapping up the episode. But, if listeners wanted to take one thing away from you or this episode, what would that be?
If you want to be in marketing, you got to love people on that. All my job is really about listening to people and understanding and empathizing with them, whether it's my team, whether it's the consumer we meet, or even the agency partners that I work with. Very often, we turn marketing into set of activities. And that's where we miss the bigger picture. Brands exist to add value to people's life. Brands define culture. Brands define values in the communities they serve on that. So unless that is your passion, unless that drives you, it can become a set of activities and chores, and that's where the challenge comes.
we're here with Sandeep. We're going to hit the quick question round brought to you by Open Fortune. Appreciate you guys making this possible. Person you'd most want to sit down to dinner with?
Steve Jobs.
Favorite city in the world?
I would say Singapore.
Is it okay to sleep with socks on?
No, it's too hot.
Favorite rom-com?
Favorite rom-com. Wow. I watch actually a lot of Korean dramas.
Okay.
Could I talk about those?
Favorite Korean drama?
The recent one I saw, Queen of Tears, was amazing.
Okay, I'm going to have to check it out. Best spot to eat in New York City?
Best spot. I was at Bungalow last week. Celebrity chef Vikas Khanna.
Oh, wow.
Amazing food.
Wow, I can only, in 40 years, what will people be nostalgic for?
40 years, social media.
Interesting. What do you think replaces it?
I don't know. Life would be very different. I mean, we would be living in a very different context of what it is. And technology is not going to exist the way we see it. It's a lot of friction today, right? It's
Absolutely.
Not really there.
Top 3 brands right now that you really love what they're doing from a marketing side?
Look, I love Coach and what it does. So I have to start with that. I truly admire, Coke. Right on that. And I'm rooting for Nike.
Yeah, with the new CEO
coming up with amazing marketing. I've seen some stuff recently.
Yeah,
it looks amazing.
They're special, and they got a new CEO who would love to have on the podcast. I don't know if you saw that. He worked his way up from an internship.
I read the whole thing. It's amazing story.
One thing people don't understand about working at Tapestry is?
Tapestry is such a creative environment in every aspect beyond just being in design and creative, right? All the way from, we have a lot of CFOs who run the company, but I have most fun having creative discussions with my CFO.
Amazing. That's interesting because the CFO-CMO relationship isn't usually, that amazing, but that's so awesome that Tapestry has that just culture. What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
That things will get easier.
Facts. In one sentence, how would you sum up the internet?
It's the most powerful tool at our hands, but sometimes we don't know how to use it.
Who's somebody you think should have on this podcast?
Who's somebody? We can't get Steve Jobs back.
Get AI version of him.
We can get AI version of him. Yeah, why not?
And then in 10 years, you can catch Sandeep Seth blank.
Still working on Coach, making it the most iconic brand ever.
There you go. Well, we're going to have to revisit this in 10 years. Sandeep, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great.